Today's class is all about fabric paper, and as you might guess, fabric paper comes from the marriage of something paper and something fabric. Ta-da! It's simple. But there's a lot of little things you can do to put these two things together. So today we're going to create our own paper from a happy accident that I experienced, and then we're going to make it into fabric paper, and then we're going to do some creative stuff with it. So we're going to get started. First thing we're going to talk about today is the color wheel, because we're going to use the color wheel to deal with our various color combinations and stuff here in just a second when we work with the paint. So I just want to talk about this. It's not a color class, but it's just a little reminder of how colors kind of work a little bit. There is a cool side to the color wheel, which works from, it's on this side of the color wheel, and there's a hot side or a warm side on the color wheel, which is over here. As long as you work with colors that are next to each other, such as red, red-orange, orange, yellow-orange, or red-violet, if you just stay close to the neighbors on a color, or close to neighbors over here, or close to neighbors over here, when you're working with color, the colors are going to go together. Where you get in trouble is if you do red and green, or yellow and violet. If you do those colors on the same piece, when you're working with paint, like we're going to work with here in a second, you're going to get mud, because that's just how it works. Colors will muddy up. And so we don't want to do mud. We want to have nice clear colors. So that's where we're going to get started today, making our fabric paper, because we're going to color the paper. Now, what we're going to use is paper towels. These are paper towels that are actually cloth paper towels, they're called. And they're used in the construction industry, and you get them in a big box at the big box stores or the home improvement stores. And they come in well, they're nice big sections, and they're perforated so you can just pull them apart. So that's what I'm using as my foundation for my fabric paper. And what we're going to do with the fabric paper as we move along is we're going to make really pretty fabric paper flowers out of it, circle flowers. So what I have here that I'm going to work with today is an ice cube tray. It's an old plastic ice cube tray, came from the dollar store. And I have some water. I'm going to put some water in my ice cube tray. Move over here just a little bit more so you can see a little better. And get all electronic things out of the way so we don't have a problem. And I'm going to just mix up just some little sections of color. And that'll be plenty for what we're doing. So I have water. Then I've got some colors of craft paint. You can use any kind of paint you want, but craft paint I have an abundance of, and so that's what I'm going to use. So I have some red, some orange, some yellow, some green. I also have some pink and some purple and some blue, and I have a metallic. Now you can use whatever you have, but these are just the ones I'm going to work with today. So I have water in my little ice cube tray, and I'm going to put just a drop or two, just a little drop, just a little tiny bit, maybe 3 drops of paint in with the water, and then I'm just going to stir it up. Now you can always add more paint if you don't have enough. You can always add more water if you have too much. If it's too thick, that's not quite pigmented enough, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to add a little more paint. And I'm just stirring it up with the back end of a paintbrush. And I have some towels here that I'm going to dab off. So let me show you kind of the color. It's just a kind of a wash of color that we're doing. So it doesn't have much color. Okay, so it's not much color. So that's the blue. I can always add more if I want, right? And I'm just using a foam paintbrush and using the handle to mix up the color. So I'm just going to keep going. So let's go to purple. It's a good idea to shake up your containers of paint also. And I didn't get very much water in that one, so we'll add some more water. And you'll notice that I'm putting colors that are kind of similar, which are kind of close to each other on the color wheel, together here by each other when I mix them up into the color washes. And the reason I'm doing that is because then if they slop into each other, you know, like it's slopping over there a little bit, it's okay, because it's not going to initially make mud. All right, let's go to green. Shake up the green. Put a few drops of green in here. Mix that one up. Now some of these colors, because they're craft paint, will have more strength involved, you know, as far as when they dilute down. Some of them will be stronger, some of them will be really, really weak, and that's just the nature of the craft paints. And I'm using a variety of brands of craft paint here. The brand is irrelevant. So just stir them up. And then I'm going to add the orange. So I'm kind of loosely working around the color wheel, very loosely. I'm just putting kind of the cool colors together and the warm colors together. And again, if you don't have enough water in the little well, just add a little bit more. And I'm going to need one more for the red here. And then we have a place for the metallic over there. That'll be fine. Okay, so we're going to add some red. I'll just go ahead and squirt the red in this one. Or take the lid off and dump it in. This red has managed to clog up at the top of the paint bottle. So we're just going to see if we can get some red out of this. If not, I'll grab another red. Yeah, that one's not going to dilute down. For some reason, that one's gotten solidified in the bottle. Of course, only when you want to do a glass do they do that. So we'll switch to another red. A more fluid red. Much better. Okay, mix them up. Mix it up. And then I'm going to put a little bit of metallic in one of these over here just to have a little variation. Metallic is always a nice touch. It just gives a little sparkle to things. Okay, so there we go. We have our paint, our little paints ready to work with. So there we go. And now what I'm going to do, and of course you immediately start getting paint all over yourself, but that's, you know, that's the fun of it all, right? Now you need to protect your surface. And as I said, I'm going to get the electronic things kind of moved out of the way. And I have a non-stick surface down here. If I were doing this, you know, and making a whole bunch of these, I would actually have plastic all over my table, but I don't, so I'm only doing this for demonstration, so we're just going to put a small surface like this. So I have dampened this with water, and I'm going to dampen it a little bit more because it will just help the paints to kind of blend around on it. So the paper towel is damp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my container of paint, and I'm not going to pay too much attention to being really careful with what I dip the brush into, other than I'm just going to kind of try and stay, as I said, with colors next to each other on the color wheel. So here is my towel that's dampened, and the nice thing about that is you can just soak up any water that got sprayed there, and then just pick up some color and just start dabbing the color around on your paper towel. Just put it on, right? Just put it on. And if you want to put some red on this one, put some red, because red is nice with the orange and the yellow, because those are close to each other on the color wheel. If you need metallic, the metallic will settle out right away, so you have to kind of mix it as you get a hold of it. And you just simply put your paper towels, fill them up with paint. Now, when I really did this, as I said, I discovered this by accident. I was doing this just like this, and I was using these paper towels as a printing surface. So I was filling them with paint like this, and then I was spreading them out on paper and pieces of fabric, and I was actually printing with them. So this became like a great big giant ink pad. And then I was letting them just sit and, you know, thinking, oh, they were so pretty. I'd see if I could do something with them. And they dried and they were beautiful. And I thought, you know, this has got possibilities. So it didn't even start out like this. So since then, I've painted my paper towels just to be able to paint them and use them just as a material for the artwork. So anyway, it's just fun to do. So with that, you can just set that off to the side, go to another one. So we'll put it over there, bring the paint back in. In case you hear anything in the background that sounds like a cat, it is. It's my cats who think that they're being abused because they're being left in the other room. So if you happen to hear them, that's what it is. Okay, so these are nice. This is nice and damp, and now we're going to go to the kind of cooler tone. You can also, another thing you can do with these, instead of having them wadded up like that or scrunched up that way, you can actually fold them like this. So you can fold them up and put your paint on them like this. And then once you get some of that, then you can turn it over and go to another color. And if it doesn't have enough pigment, go to a different color. And then just open it up. And you can go to another color, which I'll go to yellow because yellow is close to green on the color wheel, so I can put yellow on there. And then I can open it up and take a look at it and see what do I want. And I might go this way and pick up some of the metallic and put some metallic in there and maybe fold it over and put some more. So basically it's just a different way of applying the color to it. Doing it in folds, and so you get a more geometric effect as opposed to the dabbling more spotty kinds of effects. So you can see some of the more linear patterns that I get by doing it that way. So there you have another one. All right, so at that point, let's say you've used all the paint up, which we haven't, but let's pretend that we did. So let's say we've got all the paper towels all painted. And so then what I do is I just take them and you can either leave them wadded up like this, and what the pigment will do is it will continue to kind of move around in the, seep from one section to another. Or the other thing you can do is lay them out nice and flat and let them dry. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to spread out a scrap of fabric. This is a rag, and I'm just going to put them on this like this, which ideally this would be plastic. But for the purposes of just keeping moving, we're just going to use these little rags. And then one of my favorite things to do too is when I have them all finished, I'm all done printing or coloring the paper towels or whatever, take another paper towel and just soak up everything. So just soak up all the mess that you've got. And sometimes these scrap paper towels, that clean up everything are the best. You get the best colors from them. So that is how you paint paper towels to start your fabric paper for these wonderful circle flowers. All right, let me clear off my surface here. Get the paint out of the way. Okay, voila. And we're gonna move this out of the way because we'll just let that sit over there and just do its thing. Clean up just a little bit around my table here. And we're gonna get all this stuff out of the way and keep going here. All right. So let me show you the results of some of these experiments with the paper towel, the grand paper towel experiment. Let's go this way. And now you'll notice that my hands look like they normally do. They got all kinds of paint on them. That's how I usually look. All right, so here are some of the painted paper towels. Some of the effects that I got just by playing around. So here's this one. And here's another one. Okay, this is from the same, two different paper towels that I put together, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And here are some other ones. This one you can see the more square kinds of shapes and stripes and things. That came from folding the paper towel and dabbing the paint around on it. This is more dabbly, painterly looking, and that's because I just had it wadded up and was just dabbing paint around on it. Actually, some of these my husband did for me because I was doing some other stuff, so he painted a bunch of paper towels for me. He's the one that supplied the paper towels to begin with, so that was kind of fun. So there's another one. Okay, let me give you a little wider look at some of these. I think that you'll get more of the effect if you see them from a distance rather than quite so close up. If I find one that's really cool, close up, I'll show it to you. There's another one. There's another one. But you can see these are spots of metallic. You can see I've kind of stayed kind of close to the similar colors on the color wheel, so either blues or greens or reds, but not so much green and orange or green and red on the same one, or orange and blue on the same one, because then I don't run the risk of muddying the colors. So lots of pink and red. There we brought in some purples. This one more yellow. And now this was a cleanup rag. So this was one where we were just cleaning up the table surface. And so that turned out to be a nice one. And then this one was a similar thing, just cleaning up the table, cleaning up the area. So it's not real intense with color, but it's got some pretty interesting shades there. Okay, so then what do you do with them? You let them dry. So you set them all out, just like I showed you, and I usually put them on plastic, like I said. And I just set the plastic out on a table. I just cover the whole surface with plastic, and then I just lay the paper towels all out. And it takes like overnight to dry. So then you have these great pieces of cloth paper towel. I mean, it's still paper, but this is a better quality paper towel than like what you buy in the grocery store, that the kitchen paper towels. But you can always work with those and see what, how they hold up and stuff, because I've done some really nice, gotten some nice effects with those as well. I just happen to like these because they're heavier. Okay, so I've got them all dry. Now they're all wadded up still. And so that's it doesn't work very well when they're, still kind of dried into a crumble, kind of like this. They kind of dry like this, except, this is, they'll be all kind of wadded up, sort of, they kind of dry kind of like that, right? It's rather than like this. So what you want to do then is to use a cruddy iron, and I do mean cruddy. I mean like icky, dedicated to fiber arts kind of iron. And you want to protect your surface of your ironing surface with, I use parchment paper. And so this is available in your grocery store aisle where they have baking supplies. And so I put a sheet of this on the bottom, that protects the surface I'm going to press on. And then I put my completely dry painted paper towel on that. And then I put another piece of parchment over the top of it. Or if I'm not in the mood to even do that, sometimes I just iron right on the paper towel. But it's best if you put a piece of parchment paper on it. And also open the windows and get some ventilation going, because sometimes the acrylic paint can get kind of fumy. So very, very well ventilated area is a good idea. And press the paper towels just with a hot, dry iron. But make sure it's an iron that's dedicated to fiber arts. You do not want to press your clothes with it, because it's going to get nasty in a hurry. I'm just telling you the truth there. Okay, so we have a wonderful stack of various colors of paper towels, right? This is just my leftover paint from what I was using for something else. So I have my stack of towels, and now what do I do with them? Well, there's a couple things you can do. If you want to have a double-sided towel like this one, so I've got one color on one side and a completely different one on the other side, then you want to put them together with a product that's a heat fusible glue, which I just dropped on the floor. I'll be right back. Don't you know? The best laid plans, right? Okay. Oh well. Okay. This one happens to be Embroidery, the regular weight, and it's a heat activated sheet of glue. So that's what this stuff is. And what I did was I took 2 pieces of paper toweling. I put this between them, and make sure that you sandwich your piece with parchment paper on the bottom, and then the toweling, and then the Embroidery, then the next piece of towel, and put another piece of this on the top, and then heat it according to the instructions of whatever kind of heat activated glue that you're using. So fusible bonding web. That's what I did with these. And so that made a nice sturdy piece of fabric paper now, because I've got enough weight, enough stuff put together that it's not going to tear and fall apart when I start stitching on it. The other thing you can do too, that I've done a lot of times with different kinds of papers, is I've used interfacing for the back. Now, interfacing comes in different weights, and this one of these, which has threads on it, doesn't it, from when I was sewing. One of these is very lightweight, and then this has, this is a fusible interfacing, and it has dots of glue on the back side. So you can see the dots. So all those dots are glue. This is a very lightweight, non-woven, fusible interfacing. This one, on the other hand, is a little heavier interfacing, and this one has also a dot pattern, but the dots of glue are much, much closer together than they are on this one. Let's see if I can get a comparison here for you. And this one is not nearly as transparent as this one. So this is much lighter weight interfacing. So it comes in different weights. Both are fusible, both are non-woven. You just kind of get some stuff and just play with it. I buy interfacing because it's not expensive. I buy it 5 yards at a time, and then just try it out and see what it does and how it behaves. So I put a layer of this interfacing on the back of this particular paper towel right here that was painted, and it's sewed with it. You can see some of my test sewing on here, and it was too lightweight. It wasn't behaving the way I wanted it to. So I just went back and I just put another layer of the very same interfacing right over the top of it and fused it on. So this one has 2 layers on it. So that's fine. So 1 layer, 2 layers, whatever. So 2 different ways to work with it. So you can either fuse 2 pieces together with a fusible glue, or you can put interfacing on the back. Either way you want to do that is fine. All right, now moving to the fun part. This turns, when you do this, it turns it into a fabric paper so that you can actually do this kind of thing, which is you can now stitch on it. See the stitching? All right, so the question becomes then, how do you get those circles? And that comes from, there's actually a whole class also, just so you know. I have an entire class on exactly how to use these to their fullest, with lots of ideas and lots of fun things to do. But pretty much what it boils down to is most machine companies on the market have a circle embroidery attachment of some kind for their machines. And that's what this thing is. And so it screws onto the machine. It has a little pin. So this is the short version of how you use this. You screw it onto the machine. Sometimes it comes with special screws and a special screwdriver to attach it to your machine. It will have a little pin on it that is sharp. This is sharp like a thumbtack. And it will move up and down. And this becomes the pivot point for creating your perfect circles, right? So that is that one. Now, if you don't have that or don't want to invest in an attachment like this right now, the low-tech way of doing that is to use a thumbtack. So you just take a thumbtack with the pointy end up and you tape it down to the bed of your machine. So let's pretend that the needle of your machine, just loosely pretend this is where the needle is going to go down the machine down there. So you're going to tape your thumbtack out here to the left of your needle, about parallel from it, straight out. If you're a little up or a little down, it doesn't matter a whole lot, but come out here the distance that you want. But remember that wherever you tape the tack with the pointy end up, wherever you paint that or tape that, that's going to be the pivot point of your circle. So just like on the tool here, wherever this point is, right here, from here to the needle, which the needle is going to be, the needle is going to go down about here, next, about this distance away from this tool. It's where the needle enters the fabric. So from the pivot point to where the needle goes in, that's the radius of the circle. So that's half the diameter that your circle is going to be. All you have to do is think about it and it makes sense. So what you're going to do then is you're just going to start stitching circles. And I want to show you some ideas about threads here so that we just get some. I'm going to show you some different kinds of threads that you might use for doing this kind of stitching. Now, there's all different ways to do this and all different kinds of threads to use. And this is your chance to use some of those gorgeous, gorgeous threads. And so we're going to talk about several of them. This thread right here, it has an orange label on the end of the spool. This is by the company Sulky. This is a 12 weight thread. This is a pretty hefty thread. It has, it has some heft to it. So it is a nice thread. It gives you some really nice embroidery look stitches. And they're ones that you can really show up on your embroidery. That's what this one is right here. This one right here is done in one of the 12 weight threads. And it's really a nice, nice thread. There's, let's see, some other ones on here. Let me find some more just to show you. This one's a 12 weight thread also. So it shows up, it's just a really nice heavy look to your stitching. These are all variegated and these are all the 12 weight threads here. They're beautiful colors. You want to use a top stitching needle when you work with these, and you don't want to sew very fast because they're a thicker thread than you're normally used to using. The standard thread that you're going to sew most seams with is about a 30 weight thread, and that is the higher the number, the thinner the thread. The lower the number, the thicker the thread. So a 12 is much thicker than a 30. And this is an example of a top stitch needle. The top stitch needle that I used on all of this was a 90 or a 14. And the top stitch needle has a bigger eye. It has a deeper groove, so it gives the thread more, it abrades the thread less, and it gives the thread more room. Okay, some other threads you might use. This is a polyester embroidery thread. This is a 40 weight thread, so this is a little lighter in weight than even what you would sew your clothes with, which means you can use the more dense stitches. This is cotton embroidery thread. This was the polyester embroidery thread, and although both of them have a sheen, the polyester thread tends to be even shinier than the cotton embroidery thread. Here, and then there's also rayon embroidery threads. They are very shiny. These are 40 weight, so you can use some of the denser stitches also. Then you have threads like this one. This is a twist. I think you can see that that's a twisted thread. And again, a rayon, but it's not variegated and it's not solid. It's twisted. This is a metallic thread. And these are called super twist threads, and these are a metallic thread that have I think it's a rayon or something that runs with it. These are really pretty. They come in variegated and plain colors as well. And then probably my all-time favorite for doing any kind of embroidery work or decorative work is the King Tut Superior King Tut thread. This is a 40 weight, I believe it's a 40 weight thread. It's a long staple cotton, and it is 40 weight, yes. And so you can use it. It will build up and make some of the most gorgeous embroidery stitches. And the King Tut is all variegated. Comes in, some of the variegations are not don't have as wide a range of color variation as some of the other ones. Like this one has a wide range of color. Anyway, those are some ideas for colors that you can use and kinds of threads you can use for this work. One other thing I wanted to tell you, or just in case you don't know about it, this has, you can see this shiny plastic around it. These threads fall off the spool, which many embroidery threads do. You can just have them sitting there minding their own business and they just start falling off the spool. If you use this stuff called Wonder Tape or Amazing Tape, it is, as soon as I get it loose here you go. It is a non-sticky, it's a glueless tape. Glueless, okay? So there's no glue on it, but it will stick to itself. And so that's what I've used to wrap around these spools. And they will hold that thread in place. So you can see, there it is. So I've just wrapped it around the spool, and then it will stick to itself. So there's no glue, there's no sticky residue, but it holds your threads on the spools, which is really nice. And sometimes, like on this one, the end of the spool broke off, and so then that's the end that had the little place where the thread would catch and hold it on the spool. So when that happens, then again, it starts falling off the spool, unwinding and coming off. So just take a piece of the Wonder Tape or the Amazing Tape and wind it around that. And that will keep you from losing your mind, as it were. Okay, let me get rid of the threads here. So now you have some threads to work with. You know what needle to use. Now, what presser foot should you use? Well, when you're doing this kind of embroidery work or decorative work, you want to use a foot that has a scoop out on the back. So it's an applique foot, but it has a scoop out on the back, so there's plenty of room for that to ride up over the stitches so that it doesn't bind up and try to make a big wad on your stitching. And sometimes these feet are nice and wide because they work with the wider width, like the 9mm stitches, and sometimes they're narrower because your machine only does a 5mm or 6mm width. So you can see there's a great difference in the width of those two feet. In fact, let me show you here just a little closer. So you can really see the difference in the width of those feet. So this will accommodate the 9mm wide stitches, and this accommodates 5. So 2 different machines. Okay, so we've got the feet, the threads, the needle, the attachment to make it go in circles, or the thumbtack. We've created our fabric paper, and so now we're going to stitch away, and we're going to just stitch in circles. So this is what happens. You're going to take your fabric paper that you've created. So this one has interfacing on the back, right? And I'm going to put it on either my thumbtack or my circle embroidery attachment. You can see the hole is right there. So remember I said when you put it on the pointy part, the tack part, from there to where the needle stitches is the radius of the circle. That's half the distance, half of the diameter. So when you start stitching on your machine, making these circles, you have to allow for knowing that you're not going to stitch off the edge. So when you start, you're going to have to kind of test it, you know, move your towel around on your machine to make sure that you've got some room here and some room here. Then when you come to the next circle, and especially if it's a lot bigger like this one is, you're going to have to make sure that you have room here so that you don't overlap your circles, because we're going to cut these out and we're going to make some cool stuff with them. Now here I got pretty close. That's really, really close right there. But I can still make that work. So just stitch a bunch of circles, and that's what we have here. So here's a whole bunch of circles in this one. Now you've noticed there's all different kinds of stitches. Some of my favorite stitches to do this with are the utility stitches or the construction stitches. This is a honeycomb stitch. This one was it was like the opposite of the blind hem stitch. So this was an overcasting stitch, where the blind hem stitch stitches straight and then it zigs over to the left. This one stitched straight and zigged over to the right. So it made a really interesting flower petal shape. Here's the same thing, but I lengthened the stitch length. So this stitch and this stitch are the same. I just simply made it longer. And you can see how it made more distance between these petal looking things. This is another one of the utility stitches. This is a 3-step zigzag. So it just goes out and back, but it takes zig, 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 zig. So it stitches 3 times and back. This one was a triple straight stitch. So this has 3 stitches, straight stitches in every single little rotation around here. And you can see my circle's not real perfect right in here, but that isn't going to make any difference. So you just go with what you get. So again, this is the 3-step zigzag. This was a patterned stitch. And some of these this is an actual decorative embroidery stitch or decorative stitch that I was playing around with on one of the machines. And it stitched out fine. I just had to be careful and not go very fast. So we have more, and each time I either varied the stitch or I varied the size of the circle. So I want a nice variety of sizes of circles, because when I start building my flowers, I need to have things that I can layer up and have different diameters of circles. So here's another one and another one. And here's one. This is a fun one. This is exactly the same stitch. This flower, or this circle, and this one are exactly the same, except I went around this one a second time, offsetting the little zigzag areas just slightly, and so it ended up giving me a secondary pattern as I went around. And then here is another little set of flower circles stitched out, but I want to show you the difference between, let's see, let's go this way. This is very similar to this, okay? I'm going to do it this way so you can see it, so you have a real comparison. Okay, this is the same stitch as this is. So it was the same three-step zigzag that I went around 2 times, so I got that extra little set of petals. So you can see that it looks like it's like a figure 8, but it gives you the illusion of another set of petals, just like on this one, right? Now, the difference between this, because it's smaller, and this, is that this was done on a 9mm machine, a machine that will stitch 9mm wide. So this is the maximum width I could get with this stitch. This was done on my other machine that the maximum width was 5mm. So you have, depending on what your machine will do, you may get a different effect depending on how wide it can stitch. So just so you know. So there we go. We have those circles stitched. Now we need to cut out the circles. So I'm going to use some different scissors to cut them out with. And I just want to show you some options. So one option, of course, is just a plain pair of scissors, just a small scissor that has the straight handles, something that's nice and strong because it doesn't fatigue your hand as much. This one is a pinking shear. So it cuts a zigzag pattern. So you can see the zigzag, that's the pinking shear. And so it will cut a pattern that looks like this. Okay, so that's a pinking shear. This one is a different one that you can still buy today. I've had these for a long, long time, but you can still get this scissor, and it is called a scalloping shear. So rather than pinking the fabric, or the fabric paper in this case, it will scallop it. So it will create a scallop rather than a zigzag, and you get a completely different, fun kind of look by doing that. So those are the 3 pairs of scissors that I'm going to use to cut out my circles. And now you just get your sheet of circles that you've stitched out, and you just decide how you want to cut them out. So this one, that is the honeycomb right here. This is a honeycomb stitch, just a utility stitch on my machine, but I love it. I'm going to cut this one out, just following the edge of my circle. And I'm just going to come right around here. Now, this is good work, a good activity for when you want to watch television or something like that, because you can just sit down and just cut out all your little circles and just use your imagination as to which kind of scissor you want to use to cut it out and what kind of effect you can get, because if you cut this out with a pinked edge, you get a completely different effect if you cut it out with just a smooth edge. And I'll show you that, because on this one I have exactly the same stitch right here. That's a honeycomb stitch, different color thread, and I'm going to cut it out with just my regular scissors. And one of these honeycomb stitches was done on the 9mm machine. One of them was done on the 5. And so you'll see quite a difference in the width of the stitch. The point is just use what you have. And you'll be really surprised at how creative you can get just by using what you have. Whatever stitches you have on your machine, you'll find different ways to use them, and what fun things result. So that is the very same exact stitch, except this is 9 millimeters wide, so you can see it's wider. This is a 5 millimeter, so it's a narrower. Same exact stitch. This one's cut out with the pinking shear, and that one's cut out with just the plain scissor. It works great. Completely different effects, right? That's the fun of it. It's the creative part of it. You just go for it and see what you can come up with, you know? All right, let's do one more, and then I'll start showing you, well, I'll do a couple more here. I'm just going to give myself a kind of a rough outline here, rough cut, so I can cut them out. So I've got a couple just kind of roughly cut out. Now what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to cut following the stitching, and I'm going to do this rather quickly. And I'm going to follow the stitching whether the stitching is perfect or not. So you can see right here it's not so perfect. That's okay. We'll just work with it. Now when you're cutting, this is an old cutting rule, I guess you'd say. Move the item that you're cutting and not your scissors. So you can see how I am moving the piece rather than twisting and turning my scissors. I'm twisting and turning the piece that I'm cutting. You tend to get a smoother cut if you do that. And you just, all in all, you just generally come out with a nicer result. Okay, so there's one. And this we'll just figure out what to do with as we work along. Some of them, when you do your stitching, will come out perfectly, and sometimes they're not as perfect. The pattern doesn't end as beautifully as you would like for it to be. That's all right, you know, it's no big deal. You're just getting, we're working with paper towels, for goodness sakes. Leftovers that we're going to turn into something really fun. And I've got a whole bunch of things to show you here in just a minute. You know, ways that I've used the different fabric, paper, circle, flowers. All right, so around we go. And if you happen to clip your stitching when you get, you know, maybe you're not paying attention. If you happen to clip the stitching, just use a little dab of glue on the back side of it and let the glue dry, and it will secure the stitching, and it's fine. All right, so now we have, these are double-sided because these are the ones, remember, that I stuck together with the heat-activated glue. So I have a choice of colors. This, on the other hand, has interfacing on the back, so I'm limited to just the one side. And this one, of course, then is the same double-sided fabric paper. And let me do one more. I'm going to cut out one more from this big circle right here, and let me use the scalloping shears just so you can see how those cut. They do fatigue your hand a little bit more than the pinking shears. They tend to be a little stiffer in the action of the scissor. But oh, it's so pretty, it's worth it. I mean, it really is worth it. If you have any kind of synthetic suede or felt, these work really nicely to put a nice edge on those fabrics also. And I'm going to be doing some other classes with some other fabric paper techniques also that I think you'll enjoy seeing as well. So be sure and check back for those. Okay, so here is one of the circles cut out using the scalloping scissors. So we have scalloping shears, we have pinking shears, and then we have just using the regular scissors. Okay. Now I did try using the scissors like these, which are the scissors meant for paper crafting, and they just don't have, they're just not enough, they're not sharp enough, they're not strong enough in what I found to do this. So you really need the ones that work for fabric. All right, so now we get to the more fun part of this process. So what happens next is now you start building flowers. Let me show you what some of the flowers look like, and then we'll start seeing what we can come up with here. It looks like springtime on my table. So let me spread these out so you can see what happens when you start putting the layering up the various circles and parts of your fabric paper stitched circles. All right, let's take a look at this one, and then we'll play with these that we just cut out, that we just created. This one was simply 5 circles, just 5 circles stitched with just a straight stitch with a pretty thread and cut out with the pinking shear and then put together, and there you have a flower. Okay, this one was 1, 2, 3 layers of two pinked circles and 1 scallop edged circle put together, and put some buttons, stacked buttons in the middle. This one has 3 stacked buttons for the center. So that's 3 stacked buttons. This is a itsy tiny button on top of a nice big shiny kind of, it's a plastic, but it simulates mother of pearl. Here's another one done with some of the fancier embroidery stitches. So the fancy decorative stitches work you'll just have to stitch them out and see how it looks. If you get the effect that you like, great, go for it and stitch it. And if you give it an effect that you don't like, well, don't do that one next time, right? That's just how you do it. So I've stitched the fancy stitches on 3 different ones. This one's cut out with the pinked edge, pinking shears. This one I just kind of followed the edge that the embroidery had, just with the regular scissor, and same thing out here. And this one has a stack of a couple of buttons in it for the center. Now this one had an embroidery stitch out here. Well, no, this was that 3-step zigzag. So again, I just followed the edge. This one was actually the blind hem stitch that I made as wide as it would go, and then I just kind of followed the little zigzag when I cut it out. This one was a more satin stitch. Now these satin stitches, although they're pretty, tend to be a little dense in the stitching. So sometimes they don't work so well. It worked okay on this one, but I didn't do a lot of those. I did the more open embroidery stitches, found them to be more successful. And so I cut that out with the pinking shears, and then layered up 2 buttons and then put some beads. So this one actually has beads up here on top of the buttons. This one has 3 layers, okay, cut with pinking shears, and this is the blind hem stitch again, just cut out with the, and putting some little notches in here where the little V's were, a couple of buttons. This one is nothing special. This was just a little scallop stitch, just a straight stitch, scallop stitch. This is that 3-step zigzag. This was a flower stitch, and then I put this together with a brad. So this one doesn't even have a button, it has a brad to hold it together. Here's another one. This has got 4 layers. So some done with all of these layers were done with the scalloping shears and utility stitches. Like one is a gathering stitch, one is a zigzag stitch, and this one is the very overlock stitch, made as wide as it will go. This is called the gathering stitch, so that's a utility stitch. That's the same one out there, just change the width of it. Same thing in here, and this one has a big button with beads to sew it on. This one is just a decorative stitch for around the edge that I just followed the edge. Straight stitch for the circle, cut with the scalloping shears, and then a button with a B button for the center. Okay, I'm going to save that one just for a minute because these are all flat applications. So here's another one with a button. So it's 3 layers with a button in the middle. This one is 4 layers with a brad in the middle instead of a button. And this one is 1, 2, 3 layers. 2 of them, my favorites tend to be this 3-step zigzag. I love that, and then just mimic the edge when you cut it out. This was a triple zigzag, so there's three pieces of thread in every stitch on that, and then 2 buttons on that one. Then I started playing around with texture, and what could you do besides just the flat circles? You know, once you figure out what you can do with something, then you want to get creative with it, right? You got to push the envelope. You got to push it, see what you can do with it. So that's what I did here. So I'm going to show you what I did on this one to get this effect. And then here's another one where I was playing around with taking the circles, cutting them up, layering them, and then gluing them back together. And so I can add 2 more here and get a multicolored flower. And then I even have some other ones to show you. All right, so let's see if we can kind of get the idea of how this happened. All right. I'm going to take this. Let's take this one, this nice flower right here. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a spiral. So see how this had kind of an ugly look right here? I'm going to go right beside that and I'm just going to cut a spiral. Now you don't really know for sure what you're going to get when you do this. So I'm just saying when you do it, you're just going to have to see what happens. Whoops, my apologies. This is where you just have to play with it and see what kind of effect you get. Don't be afraid to get creative and play. So I'm going to use a needle and thread. And I usually like working with the beading thread because it's strong. So this happens to be silicone beading thread. And you can use whatever thread you like to work with. But I like the beading thread personally because it's strong and it's thin. And it will take the abuse that I give it. So I'm going to thread my needle. And then I'm going to just kind of see where this flower takes us. Because I don't know. It's always a surprise to me where it goes, just like it is for you. All right, let's switch to this camera. Look at all that goodness. Isn't that pretty? I mean, you got to admit, that's pretty right there. Color. All right, so what I did was, I'm going to have to put on a thimble here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just start and see what happens. So I'm going to take this where I began, this place right here where I started the cut, and I'm just going to put my needle in. And I'm going to just take a couple of stitches close to the place where I cut, just so it will secure it, so it will hold except that I put my, here, we're going to start over, because I caught the loop with my needle. And you don't want to have that happen. You got to be a little more careful. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. So if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, you start again. All right. So start again. And as I said, you want to take a couple of stitches just to secure it so that things don't get away from you when you start tugging on it a little bit. All right, so we have kind of a center begun, a little pleated center. So then I might make another pleat and kind of have it headed in a circle, kind of a spiral sort of sequence. I'm going to just make a stitch. And then I'm going to kind of take a look at what might happen here. So I'll come over here and make another little stitch. And you can make the pleats that are creating the spiral, you can make those pleats go the same direction or different directions. But what I did when I was playing with these is I just simply just tried things and just to see what they would do, you know, just see what would happen. And make another one. The more pleat type stitches that you make, the tighter the spiral is going to become as we start creating the flower here in a second. But I found it was easier to do this, to take these little pleats, than it was to try and gather it up. Just gathering it with a thread just didn't work. That just didn't work at all. So, you know, you just have to see where it takes you. And I'm going to cover all this stuff up in the end. So my stitches, although I'm kind of keeping them close to the cut edge down here, are going to go away because I'm going to put something else, you know, some other layer down there. All right, so now I am to the center of my circle, and I'll show you here in just a second. So I'm going to take an extra stitch down here just to kind of hold everything. All right, so what we now have, what I've created, is this pleated spiral kind of looking thing, right? And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the flower. And this bit right here that ends up to be just kind of a like a tab where I finished cutting the spiral, that's what I'm going to build the flower on. That's going to be like the base of the flower. So it's down here at the bottom. So I'm just building this flower right on top of that. So there is that base right there, right here. So I've just built this flower around and around on top of that. And then I'm going to secure it with, you could secure it with glue actually if you wanted to, but I just find since I've got the needle and thread here, it's just about as easy to secure it with a couple of stitches. Then if I need to add some glue, I can put some glue in the back, you know, to hold things together later. But this just kind of gives me a, I think it's so cool that you can sew paper towels together and have them hold together. And they're so pretty. And who would think that it starts out, basically starts with a mistake, right? Now, I'm going to come back over here, and in order to get this to be the way I want, I'm probably going to just add a little bit of glue over there and overlap that petal back over there. Or the other thing I could do is I could come up here and I could put a stitch in here. Let's see if I can make this happen, right? And I'm going to come in here kind of in the fold of the petal, so maybe you don't see that stitch. Okay, so I've just stitched this in place back here. I'll probably still add a little bit of glue to it, but the stitching holds everything together to begin with. And then you can just knot off the back. So make yourself a knot. And then you clip your thread. But don't clip it too close because you don't want your knot to come unraveled. And there is the beginning of our little flower that we spiraled and stitched, and you've got this cool dimensional little flower happening. Okay, so what else can you do with this? As I said, you can use some glue. And so the glue that I use for anything like this is the Aleene's Original Tacky Glue. That's just always my go-to. That's always my go-to glue because it's got some thickness. It has a little bit of body, so it will kind of grab nicely. And then you can add a little bit back here if you need it to help finish supporting that. If you need if things are coming apart back here a little bit more than you want them to come apart, you can just add a little bit of glue back there. And I always store my glue in a can upside down like this because that keeps the glue down here in the tip. Now it does make kind of a mess in the bottom of the can if I leave the lid off of it very long, but it's just nice that it keeps that glue always down in the tip of the bottle, which I like. Then if you need to hold things together until they dry, you can get these neat little clamps in the hardware store. And if the depth is not too great, it can't exceed the depth of the jaws of this little clamp, but you can put those on there, and they come in couple of different shapes. Here's another one, and you can put those on there, and it just helps to hold things, so it's like another hand. You know, you have another hand in case you need it, so you can put that on there. Okay, so we're going to pretend it's all dry, which it's not, but we're going to pretend. So what other things could you do with this? Well, you could put a center in it, so you could add a center like this, and that, you know, could make kind of a cute little flower, but it's kind of a big center, so maybe I don't want that. This is the same size, so, but it's nice because it's a color contrast, so that might be another option. Or you could just go straight to buttons. So let's look at the buttons and just see what kinds of goodness we've got in here. So this is again where you just get to play. A nice thing to do with your buttons, if you don't have lots of buttons in your collection, you can go to some of your craft stores and you can buy bags of buttons, and that's exactly what this was, just a bag of buttons. And that's nice because then you have lots of choices. So then just start playing. You go, okay, well that's a choice. You know, that one works. You can have that one. That one's nice because it has some texture and it kind of goes with this. So you know what? I'm going to use that one. I'm going to use that one. I decided. So because it's a button, I'm going to sew it on. And I could have left my thread attached, which of course, hindsight being 2020, wouldn't I have just left the thread on there? Of course. So I'm going to just come through from the back straight to the middle right there. I'm going to pick up my button, which this happens to be a shank button. And this is not a garment, and so I don't have to be particularly cognizant of shanks and, you know, perfect ways to sew the button on. All you need to do is just sew it a few times. Through the shank, and you can probably see it better if I do it this way. So I'm coming through the shank of the button right there. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm coming through the shank of the button right there, and I'm going to come down to the back side of the button. Okay, so there it's through the shank a couple of times. I'm going to do it one more time. So up through the button shank, back to the back side of the flower. And that's plenty. That will tie it off. I mean, that will secure it, hold it nicely in place, and then just make your knot on the back. On the back side. Make your knot. Just like that, and clip your thread. And if you want to make sure that this holds in place quite well, then you can always add a little dot of fray check or a dot of glue back here, and that will hold it in place. But there you go. There's the little flower that we just did. And that's got dimension. It's got color on both sides. And you can just shape it because it has some stiffness, so you can shape it and you can create a flower with some dimension on it. So that's kind of how this one was created. It just started out with a bigger center, or bigger flower, so I had more room to create a center, and then I glued a little piece of extra fabric paper on the back for support. All right, so now let me show you some ways that I have used these. And, you know, because once you do it, you got to really you got to push the envelope and you got to see what else you can do. How can you get creative with this process? Okay, this one right here, this is one of the fabric paper flowers. So it's multi layers. It has a button in the middle and it has some beads around the outside edge. And then I also have another one down here on my apron. So you can see one right there. So this apron that I wear, this is an example of all different kinds of techniques. And so when I find a new technique, I just add it to the apron. All right. So let me bring in a couple of other things here to show you. One of the other things you can do is you can use the flower stitch foot, and that is this little guy. Again, that is part of another class to show you in detail how to use the flower stitch foot, but that's what this foot is. And you can do that. This makes tinier circles, and I included that in the class on the circle embroidery attachment. You can see that in detail as to how to use that foot attachment. And that's what I did here to make this little circle and this little center, because it's nice. It's a nice small little center. So this was a piece of leftover satin ribbon is what this was. And I used a temporary spray adhesive, sprayed the back of it, and stuck it onto this, which is a stabilizer that I can sew through. So I stuck it on there, and then I stitched one of the utility stitches, which this was, I think, the very overlock stitch that I stitched on here, and then I cut it out. Now, because it's a satin ribbon, it's a little ravelly, but you can see that the stabilizer's on the back of it. It's a little ravelly, and eventually it'll quit shedding threads and stuff, but for right now, it's, adds texture to our flower. This little flower was 3 circles stitched just in cotton fabric. This was not fabric paper. This was just fabric. And then I put it together with a little brad is what's on here. I sewed it together, and then I put a little brad on top of it. So you can create centers out of different fabrics too, to use with your fabric paper flowers if you wanted to. You can do centers that way. All right, so here is an example of something I did with one of the flowers. So this is a similar kind of flower to this one that we just created, similar to this one, in that it was cut into a spiral. It was a bigger circle cut into a spiral, and then I stitched it and coiled it around and stitched it as I went. When I ran out of the part that had stitching, because I had cut more rounds in the spiral, then I just pinked the edge and just used that for an added element of texture in the flower, which I thought was a really nice effect. And then I made some leaves out of some scraps and added to that flower. There's some buttons and beads for the middle. And then I put a pin back on the back, so I can wear this as a pin on, you can add it to your jacket, or I can put it on a tote bag, or on a purse, or a lot of things. This is one of the flowers done. Let's see, let's give it a different shot here so you can see a little bit better. All kinds of things in the way here. It just looks like a flower garden on this table now. Looks like I grew a flower garden today. Okay, so this is one of the flowers right here. 3 of exactly the same stitch pattern, but done in 3 different diameters of circles. And then I cut right around that shape, each of those little shapes, put them together. Now, these are not secured any place except in the center. So you still have maintained the dimension from all the inner petals. Now it's glued on the outer petal, but the inner petals still maintain their dimension. And then there's 2 buttons here that are stitched onto that. So I made the flower first, just like this one. So I made the flower completely finished, and then I decided to make a card. So this is just cardstock that I folded in half, just an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, folded in half. I used a piece of paper that I found in my stash of stuff that either I made or somebody made for me. I don't remember. I think somebody made and sent it to me in the mail, actually. I used that and put that as a background. This is paper that I had left over from stuff I was playing around with, so it just happened to be the right colors, so I just freeform cut some leaves and a stem, glued them on, glued the flower, just the back layer of the flower is glued down. I stamped the word celebrate on some more of this paper that I had that just happened to have more purple on it, and it becomes a card. So that's one way that you can give somebody a really fun card. And if somebody really liked it, they could actually frame that, you know, and it's a nice little piece of art made from fabric paper. And so this is another way to use your flowers. This is a journal page, and these are some of the flowers from some of the other classes that I've done. This is the origami flower. This is the kanzashi flower forms. This, and this, and this. Those are the kanzashi flower forms. And this one is exactly what we did today. The fabric paper flower layered up. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. And then I used it as a sun. So I put it up here in the corner, just used part of it, and so that became the sunshine with the rays of sun. So it's just a simple little art journal page, and then added a quote that says, "Spring unlocks the flowers to paint the laughing soil." And that was by Bishop Reginald Heber. And so it just becomes a fun little journal page. So you can use them in a variety of different kinds of ways. Now that doesn't get you going. I don't know what will. I'm telling you, this is I hope you've enjoyed this class as much as I enjoyed preparing it for you, and giving you some another way to use perhaps an attachment that you bought for your machine that maybe has been sitting around, you haven't used it very much, and a way to use some of your supplies that maybe you thought those paper towels that you used in your artwork for painting things or mopping up paint or whatever were so pretty you didn't want to throw them out, and now what do you do with them? Well, now you can turn them into fabric paper and do something with them fun. And just, you know, make yourself a pin, make yourself a journal page, make some cards, make some people happy. Just see what you can do and get creative with your supplies. So don't forget to check out their class notes that you can download that you'll find beside the video, and come back often and take advantage of more classes. We'll have all kinds of things here for you, anything from sewing to paper arts to all different kinds of things, and I hope that you'll enjoy that and see what you can do. Get creative with the ideas that we give you here from Barb Owen at Barb Owen Designs. And I will see you again soon. If you've enjoyed this class, tell a friend, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.